Before I, Kevin Hawken, tell my story, I should tell you a little about some strange interests and personality traits that I have that developed early in my life, probably at the very beginning of my adolescence. Even though I did all the usual masculine macho things like sports, games, fighting, wild behavior, etc., I always appreciated the arts. I liked all art, from classical to modern, from paintings and sculptures to performance art, especially if the subjects are women, away from male friends. I even read about different types of beauty, trying to define them not only in art, but also in life, and constantly drew beautiful women with a pencil. I would love to paint beautiful women on canvas, but I couldn't afford the high-end materials that would allow me to create real works of art. The various forms of female beauty that I identified, including examples of famous women, were as follows. Unstoppable. There is something aesthetically edgy about an unstoppable beauty. She often has dark vibes, rich lips, and perfectly contoured eyes and eyebrows. I think Beyoncé and Angelina Jolie are good examples. Innocence. There is something whole in an innocent beauty. She has an open face, large, expressive, multicolored eyes, and natural hair color. She is shy and very feminine, an ingenue in literature. Perhaps the most classic example is the young Audrey Hepburn, and in our time, perhaps Amy Adams. Uncompromising. There is athletic strength in an uncompromising beauty. She is tall and muscular, with well-defined features, a huskier voice than usual, and a feisty, independent personality. Think Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey, or Venus Williams. Plasticity. There is an inexplicable appeal to a plastic beauty, almost like a ceramic doll rather than a real person. She probably has fake tan, false nails, plastic surgery, bleached blonde hair, and is very thin. Can you tell this is not Paris Hilton? Femininity. Feminine beauty has an appeal between the dark vibes of a fierce beauty and the lightness of an ingenue. She takes care of her appearance, but there is nothing artificial about her. Classic examples are everyone's favorite Jennifer Aniston and Sandra Bullock. I identified another category. I grew up in a municipality on the outskirts of a large metropolis. In my community, there was significant disparity in the economic status of different areas. Luckily, no one lived below the poverty line, at least not that I knew. But about a third of the population struggled to make ends meet. About 60% were middle class, and about 7% were very rich. I come from a middle-class family. We had a good life, but there was nothing pretentious or ostentatious about us. Most rich kids either went to private school or were brats. There was one big exception, my best friend. His name was Bradley Brayton Van Rensselaer, but he only responded to Van. Everyone called him that except his stepmother, who invariably called him Bradley. Van was an excellent athlete, smart, a good guy, and so humble that he seemed almost embarrassed by his father's wealth. If you hadn't been to his house or seen his father's Bentley, you would never have thought that Van came from big money. There was something else about Van. He was the best-looking guy around and always treated women with respect. And since I always hung out with him, we were both 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing 194 pounds. And I myself was decent looking. We never lacked female companionship. Starting at the age of 18, when we were juniors in high school, we had more than enough attention. Van and I competed in lacrosse in the spring and fall, and in swimming in the winter. When Van was in 8th grade, his mother died in a tragic accident. And when Van was in his sophomore year, his father, George, married Van's stepmother, Allegra. Van's only friend invited to the wedding was me, and that was the first time I saw Allegra. She was 29 at the time, and Van and I were 17, both starting school a year later than most kids for various unimportant reasons. When I was introduced to Allegra, we both had a strange reaction. Her eyes widened, she swallowed, was silent for a good 5 or 6 seconds, and then seemed to turn on and act the same as she did with everyone else. Despite the electric charge, my first impression of Allegra was that she was a rich bitch. Perhaps my opinion of her was tainted by Ven's opinion because he didn't like her. I think because she took his mother's place, and he was not happy with that, especially since his father married her only 2 years after his mother's death. However, after a while, Ven warmed up to her when he realized that she was not trying to replace his mother, but was really interested in his success and well-being. By the middle of our junior years, he already liked her, and had no need for money. But I didn't attach much importance to his theories. Since I often visited Van's house, and she was always a polite hostess and was interested in Van's life, and since I was his best friend, then mine, I not only saw Allegra, but also talked to her often. She didn't fit into any of the categories of beauty that I identified when judging aesthetics. Allegra never had unkempt hair. Her makeup, except when she was working out and not wearing makeup, always looked professionally applied, and I never saw her in clothes, including tracksuits, that didn't look new and had creases. Her posture and mannerisms were most likely the same as they were taught in the good old school. She was far from warm, but not cold either. I never heard her say anything approaching bad taste, let alone swearing. She had the largest vocabulary of anyone I've ever interacted with. Moreover, her diction was impeccable. Allegra was universally prim and proper, polite to everyone, including me. Her body was slender, but not thin, and her face was alluring. For Allegra's beauty, I had to come up with a new classification. Correct. However, there was more to her than just the right kind of beauty, which was very difficult for me to define. There was something mysterious about her that always slightly bothered me, but at the same time attracted me to her. It haunted me, and being around her, I often stuttered. The worst time I stuttered around Allegra was when, one day at Van's house, she said that she had seen some of my sketches of women exhibited at our high school's amateur art fair, and asked me a few questions about them, and my appreciation of art. Some of the questions asked whether the women I drew were real models, or figments of my imagination. Since it was only after I posted the drawing that I realized that one of them looked very much like Allegra, I felt very embarrassed. Luckily, Van saved me from too much discussion by demanding that we throw a lacrosse ball around the vast grounds of his mansion. Van's father, George, loved me very much, because I was not only a good friend of Van's, but also because I kept him confident in certain things that I knew and which he would prefer not to make public. And I will never say what those things were. Sometimes, in my presence, he told Allegra that I was the most secretive young man he had ever met. One early Saturday summer afternoon after high school, when Van and I were 19 years old and making plans to attend different colleges, both on lacrosse scholarships, he called me in a panic. "Kevin, buddy, you have to do me a favor," he urged. "What's the matter, dude?" I just remembered that I promised Allegra that I would move all my sports equipment from the garage. My father is out of town and she has a big charity event tonight, and the caterer needs space to set up a mobile kitchen. If I don't move it, she'll either get mad or just throw my crap out or dump it in a pile somewhere and damage it. I can't move him because Julie and I are 50 miles away and we have our own plans. You have to move it for me, brother," he said excitedly. "No problem, dude. I'll go there now," I grinned. Even though I was wearing a tank top and shorts, I had just gotten out of the shower after weightlifting. I didn't see the point in changing for physical labor. When I got to Van's house, I rang the doorbell and was surprised when Allegra answered instead of the maid. She was wearing her typical outfit, a starched tight pleated skirt, nylon stockings, 7.5 centimeter heels, and a fluffy blusa. It all looked as if it had been taken from a Neiman Marcus catalog. It was so chic and expensive. "Hello, Kevin," she said politely. Hello, Mrs. Van Rensselaer," I managed to say. "Van left and won't, be back for a while, and he asked me to move his sports equipment, since it's in your way." "Very good, Kevin. You're obviously a good friend of Bradley's. This is in the garage. Follow me and I'll show you where to put everything." I followed Allegra, trying not to focus on her butt, moving back and forth as she walked in her high heels. She showed me the equipment, showed me where in the finished basement I should place it, and emphasized that everything should be stored neatly. "It's not that I don't trust you, Kevin, but could you call me over to take a look when you're done?" "Of course, Mrs. Van Rensselaer," I choked. For some reason, I was nervous for the first 5 minutes while I was carrying Van's things, probably due to dealing with Allegra. Then he calmed down. Van had a ton of equipment, including about 20 lacrosse sticks, a lacrosse goal, several tennis rackets, an ornate croquet set, a badminton net and set, and even some stuff I didn't recognize. It took me a good half hour to transfer everything. Having finished, I went upstairs from the basement and called, "Mrs. Van Rensselaer, I'm done." Allegra came out of the kitchen, smiled at me, and then walked down the stairs to the finished basement. While I was leaning against the shelves a couple of meters away from her, she looked around. "You did a great job, Kevin." Then she sat down on the low table next to the shelves and put her right foot on the chair. "Before you go, Kevin, I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind." Sure, Mrs. Van Rensselaer," I answered, hesitantly. At this moment, I looked at her lower body. Her black nylon stockings ended mid-thigh, apparently held in place by red garters. I know I was sweating and probably unconsciously licking my lips. Her first few questions were innocuous. She asked about Van and his new girlfriend, Julie. She smiled slightly as she asked them. Given that I had a hard time distracting myself from the sight, I thought I answered the questions well, even if the answers included a lot of oohs, hms, and gulps. Then her smile disappeared. "Van said you got an A in Advanced Placement English. Is that true, Kevin?" I nodded my head affirmatively. "Then why do you always stutter around me?" she asked, spreading her legs as wide as she could, given the restrictions of her skirt. I don't, actually, I don't know," I answered, stuttering, feeling the swelling in my armpits and forehead. Sweat. "Why are your pants tightening?" was her next question. I looked down. She was right. I probably blushed. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I stayed silent. "Was I depicted in one of your drawings from the fair?" I don't even remotely remember what I muttered in response to this question. "Are you really the most secretive person George knows?" After some delay, I mumbled, "Maybe, I think, yeah. Do you have an uncontrollable attraction to me?" I didn't answer. "Don't you think that since there is no one around, you can take possession of me without consequences?" she asked, looking straight into my eyes, like a cobra at its prey. After a long delay, during which neither of us said anything, I suddenly began to move like an automaton under the compulsion of some higher being, completely out of control. I walked up to her and slid my right hand under her skirt between her thighs until I reached her squelching slit. She moaned and closed her eyes for a moment when I touched her. Then her eyes opened wide and she looked at me challengingly. Running my right hand between her thighs, I unbuttoned her blouse with more dexterity than ever before with my left. When the last button was undone, I pulled the skirts of the blouse apart, revealing shockingly large, bare, beautiful mammary glands. While I was so busy that I didn't notice anything, Allegra was also busy undoing her belt and zipper. I broke contact with her for a few seconds, shedding my shorts and boxers and stepping out of them. She used this time to unzip her skirt, lift her ass, and stretch it out in front of her. Having thrown off the clothes covering the lower part of the body, I pulled her skirt all the way off, took off my shirt and her blouse, and everything was on autopilot. No schoolgirl, that was my experience, could have sex like the tigress that Allegra became. Finally, I moved my upper body away from hers. For the next few minutes, my mind was in a fog. When she stood up and turned around, for the first time in as long as I had known her, the hair on her head was disheveled and sweat was glistening all over her body. After a few minutes of catching her breath, she gathered her clothes. I was shocked to see that her blue patent leather high heels were still there, and said with a sigh, "I think I need to take a shower before the attendants arrive." I felt what I thought it would be like to be drunk, my mind foggy and my vision blurry, but I could clearly see her stumbling towards me. She kissed my lips again, then ran her finger over them and said, This is our little secret. Just before she reached the stairs, I shouted, "Maybe we can repeat it?" As it was obviously the best experience of my life up to this point. She silently turned her head, flashed a devilish smile, and wordlessly continued up the stairs. Clearly, my thoughts had been going haywire all weekend. When I went to a party on Saturday night, at least a dozen of my male and female friends asked something like, "What's wrong with you today, Kevin? You look like your mind is on another planet and your eyes don't seem to be functioning." "I just had a life-changing experience," I answered with a smile. "And no, I'm not going to talk about it." Luckily, my summer job involved intense manual labor that required my concentration or risk of injury. So I was forced to put Allegra and her perfect body and energetic manners out of my mind. However, at night, lying awake, I was consumed with thoughts of her and my mind-blowing experience with her. I worried that she was ruining me for any other woman, which was at least partially confirmed by several sexual experiences I had with high school girls and one college girl throughout the summer. They didn't even come close to matching Allegra's true beauty. Several times over the summer, I tried to contact Allegra, but without success. Of course, I saw her, Van's guest, but she acted the same as always, and I tried not to drool, so I don't think anyone realized that I was in love with her. On Friday, the day before Van was to leave for college, the Rensselaers hosted a pool party at their house. Even though Allegra was wearing a conservative one-piece swimsuit, she still wowed me. And I didn't make a fool of myself just because I was wearing mirrored sunglasses and loose swim trunks. Allegra treated me no differently than everyone else, polite and warily friendly. On the Sunday morning after a pool party, 2 days before I left for college, I received a call on my cell phone from an unfamiliar number. I thought it was probably a request for help, but I answered anyway. After I said hello, I quickly determined from the melodious, perfect diction of the voice on the other end that it was Allegra, even if she didn't say her name. "Hello, Kevin. This is Mrs. Van Rensselaer. I'm guessing you're getting ready to go to college." "Yes, I'm getting ready." "I'm leaving on Tuesday," I answered without hesitation. "Then I'm glad I called today. Kevin, I have a graduation college leaving gift for you. I hope you can come by around noon so I can give it to you." "Certainly. You didn't have to give me anything, but I'm sure I'd be grateful." "At noon." "Then I'll see you by the pool," she said before ending the conversation. I tried to suppress expectations. I didn't know if George, the maid, or the gardener would be there, or if she would even be interested in another sexual interlude with me, but, of course, deep down, I sincerely hoped for another union of bodies. When I met her by the pool, Allegra was wearing a long blanket. She smiled, greeting me, but did not hug me. "Go to the pool house, your gift is there," she grinned. On the table in the pool house lay a large gift in a beautiful package. "Please open it now. I want to see if you like it," she said. I opened it up to find a complete high-end artist's kit containing every type of brush imaginable, a palette, a folding easel, several canvases, and a variety of paints, as well as several pieces of equipment that I did not recognize. It must have cost at least several $1,000s. "Wow!" came out of my mouth unconsciously. "Amazing. Thank you very much, Mrs. Van Rensselaer. From your exhibitions at the art fair and from our conversations, I know that although you will study business, at heart, you are an aspiring artist. I hope this gift brings you pleasure." "Thank you very much," I repeated. "Everything here is so complicated that I don't even know what it all means." "I used to draw a little myself," she smiled. "Let me explain everything." Allegra told me what these things were that I didn't recognize and explained how to use them. Then, after her explanation, I saw her pull one thread on the front of her bedspread, revealing her gorgeous naked body underneath. When she saw my eyes widen, she asked in a voice that was even more sultry for her, "Did you expect anything different when I called you, Kevin? Or were you hoping for something other than an artist's set?" We barely spoke for the next 110 minutes. This experience was even better than the first because we mostly used a large, soft lounge chair for our sessions, which was much more comfortable than the table and basement setting of our first hookup. After passionate sex, as I walked out, leg in front, and more sexually satisfied than any man has any right to be, carrying her heavy artist's kit with both hands, Allegra came up to me. She gave me one last passionate kiss that almost reached my soul. Remember, our little secret. And then she dived naked into the pool. Once again, my thoughts were clouded until college orientation and lacrosse practice began in earnest the following Wednesday. I finally pulled my head out of my ass and made a conscious, mostly successful attempt to get the right beauty I call Mrs. Van Rensselaer out of my head. I loved college, started out as a forward on the lacrosse team, went to business school while taking as many art classes as I could fit into my schedule, and was more than just a hit with the ladies, including my steady girlfriend Lizbeth, at the end of the second and beginning of the third year. The only bummer was that I no longer had connections with Allegra, although Van and I were still best friends, and I saw Allegra in the summer and on vacation. Either there was no opportunity or she was not interested in another session. She still looked as prim and proper and devastatingly gorgeous as any other time I'd seen her, and I imagined red garters holding black nylons up her sculpted thighs. A very fortunate circumstance arose during my third-year lacrosse season. Van's team was on the road, including playing against my college team on Saturday at 1 p.m. Since we both played as forwards, we didn't have much contact during the game, but of course we were on the field at the same time. Van was the star of his team, and I, although I was the starter, was probably the fifth or sixth best guy on mine. George and Allegra didn't have many chances to see Van play, so they took this game as an opportunity to do so. They hadn't seen me play since high school, so I was excited to play, especially because of my interludes with Allegra. The game was amazing. Wen finished as the top scorer with 6 goals and 1 assist. I had the best game of my life with 4 goals and 3 assists, including the game-winning goal with 18 seconds left to give my team an 11-10 win. Van and I were joined on the field after the game by George and Allegra, and, as always, Van was a good sport, even if he was disappointed with the result. After exchanging pleasantries and summing up the game, George said, "I have a late flight to catch on a business trip, and I know Van has to be at his team hotel by 11 p.m., but maybe Allegra and I can treat you both, and your girlfriend Lizbeth, Kevin, to an early dinner at the Four Seasons, where Allegra and I were staying." I jumped at this chance for many reasons. The dinner was stylish, delicious, and fun. Lizbeth was very impressed with the Rensselaers, especially Allegra. Allegra and I behaved the same way we always did with each other, except for those cases when we were left alone. True, she did not fail to inform everyone that a limousine was waiting for her at the airport the next morning. As we said goodbye, George took the limousine to the airport, and Lizbeth and I took Van to his team hotel. Allegra did an unusual thing. She shook my hand goodbye. She never hugged in public, other than to lightly hug Van or George. In her hand was a small piece of paper. I quickly put it in my pocket. Before we got into my car, I sneaked a look at it, and it said, Lux 1501. As Lizbeth and I were driving Van to the hotel where his team was staying before heading to another college for Monday's game, Lizbeth said, "Van, your dad and stepmom are so cool. Lucky you. In fact, when I grow up, I want to be as stylish and beautiful as your stepmother." I felt uneasy when the first thought that came to my mind after her words was, "I wish you could have sex like her too." I chastised myself sternly until I let Van go, hugging him goodbye and wishing him luck in the next game.